What really makes St. Louis University High a Catholic school? Before filming this documentary, one individual isolated the reasons students come to SLUH High. That answer was academics. He said, by that logic, there's no reason to choose SLUH over John Burroughs. Does SLUH's reputation even lie in the Catholic formation it claims to emphasize? Many members of our community today might say no. I want to look into the effectiveness of our school's theology program, and I want to understand the experiences of our students and the expectations from our teachers.
So let's look at
The idea of whether it's even possible to teach theology in a classroom is a question I had only ever scratched the surface of. Various perspectives from around SLUH will give us a wide range of opinions and goals for our program. Fortunately, our school provides a load of optimism towards its role in religion.
Because, we are focusing on communing with the one true God and spreading, the good news of his son saving life, death, and resurrection to everyone. And that is the most important thing that you could communicate to someone.
I took a class with Mr. Lally this summer of my junior year, and that really helped cement why I believed in the Catholic faith and understand stuff like nihilism and existentialism and secular humanism and why there's evil in the world. All those kind of big questions and how the Catholic Church answers them.
I think the RCIA program is one of the greatest things we've done in terms of giving students who haven't had a faith tradition a chance to join the church fully. Once again, Mr. Kelly doesn't get enough credit for doing all these things.
Theology is different from the other subjects, and challenges due to students' different levels of interest are present.
A lot of times for people, I think theology can be like a sleeper class. I feel a lot of people just don't really talk about theology class outside of class because they just I'm gonna get through it.
There's definitely students who try to get something out of the theology class, but I think there's also just a lot of this is just another grade.
Majority, I feel it's such a standardized curriculum with certain goals and papers to write, and it doesn't really allow much room for growth. So I don't feel we can fully expand.
As it turns out, our students and faculty have contrasting opinions about the purpose and goals of our program. A dispute exists over the extent of the capabilities of a theology class.
So when people came here, the theology department and theology classes were meant to be what many people refer to as a third leg of the stool, right? You receive a lot of faith formation at home, you receive a lot of faith formation at your parish, and then you receive an additional faith formation at school. Well, what has happened in the modern world, but less people are practicing at home and less people are going to church on Sundays. And so those aspects of faith formation have faded away, leaving behind only theology class. And the truth of it is, I'll just admit it right now, a class 3 or 4 times a week for an average of 3.5 hours every week, that cannot provide someone all the faith formation they need.
I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I've gone to youth group at my parish all through high school, so that's really where it got where I got introduced to the faith, and that's where it's been the most development. SLUH has been kind of a really good supplement to that.
The church fundamentally is not a building or an institution. The church is a community of assembled people who share the same belief. That's what the church is. And without that community, there is no growing and expanding in the faith.
The parents are the primary teachers. The family is the domestic church. And so that's why I think there's such a wide disparity, because people have such different families, and so they're going to be different interest, openness, all that kind of stuff coming in. And so I think of my role as certainly secondary. And I think what happens in theology class is secondary as compared to what happens in the family.
Sophomore year, the teacher I had, he had like really hard quizzes, and and in the back of my head I was thinking like, why is this so hard? We were just kind of basically just memorizing stuff. I was like, why is this so hard? I don't like. Yeah, this is theology class. You're supposed to be not just head knowledge, but kind of like, heart knowledge about the whole person and God and stuff like that.
So, should theology classes be focused more on providing experiences of prayer and retreats and service and community? No, I think if you are a part, I think if SLUH is going to hold to its Catholic Jesuit mission, I think we have to do everything in our power to provide all those other opportunities simultaneously with a deeply intellectually rigorous theology class. I see my role in a class as a more intellectual role with kind of dabbling in the moral and ethical guidance sort of place, because the intellectual crosses over into that very quickly. There are also some very deep intellectual questions that do need to be addressed, and that if you don't address them, like students will be lost. Like, how do you read the Bible? Like, what do you do about like the passages of violence or difficulty in the Old Testament? How do you incorporate the very difficult teachings of Christ into your own life?
For me, what I've come to understand is like I try to meet students where they're at. But what I've noticed in my students over the years, I think this might be my 29th year, is there's a widening gap in what students know about the Catholic faith, and I think a widening gap in how much people practice, and a widening gap in how much people actually are interested in it. And so I've definitely changed my teaching style in a lot of ways over that time period.
The differences in opinions continued as I asked our subjects what they would like to change in SLUH's approach to religious education.
I think it's more not of a question of just like what are we teaching in the class, because SLUH is really good at teaching stuff. I think it's more a question of like kind of allowing students to kind of dig deeper into what do I believe and that doesn't really happen in a classroom. That happens more just like on retreats and like in small groups
I think we need more focus on actually doing prayer, talking about Ignatian spirituality, but actually experiencing Ignatian spirituality. I would have more service, and I would talk more between like retreats, service, and theology class, like have it more tightly knit together. And yeah, so I mean, I would try to introduce more experiences and have those woven into the curriculum.
One thing I think SLUH has to think about is how to empower parents and families to talk about the faith and share the faith, and how we can support that so that you guys are getting it in more places than just here. The theology classes aren't hopeless, but we just have to totally recontextualize what we're doing since we now know that a lot of people aren't receiving that faith formation at home. And so where does a theology class begin? You have to begin with very foundational aspects. And actually what you can't even start by building something up or building up ideas or you have to start with deconstruction. And what I mean by deconstruction in a theology class, you have to start by taking what are the commonly accepted worldviews of the young people who enter our classroom, explain to them why those conceptions of the world are not really sensical in any way, or not helpful, or even worse, hurtful and destructive. You deconstruct all that and explain why those are bad ideas or not good ideas. And then after that process, you can begin sharing, what is the Catholic faith or the Christian faith with them.
So who makes the best argument in order to direct the future of SLUH? There's not really a definite answer. SLUH's intellectual focus, described by Mr. Lally, and the more experience-focused curriculum pioneered by Jacob and Mr. Garavaglia both share strengths. It's also worth mentioning that as our school's culture changes over time, our approach to teaching will develop as well. Even with contradicting opinions, it's necessary to think about these bigger questions. Many students, myself included, won't even stop to think about what SLUH High is trying to accomplish. Knowing the purpose of the choices we make and the choices that affect us develops us as someone greater and unlocks a potential that we didn't know of before.